The journey towards spiritual awakening or approaching the divine, to a large extent, is learning how to come into full alignment with life itself. And this can be expressed and has been expressed in different ways. One of the fairly common phrases you hear in spirituality these days is just allow everything to be as it is. It seems a simple enough instruction and yet can be very challenging at times. It's easy to allow things to be as they are when everything's going our way, and a lot more difficult to do when challenging times arise. But this is exactly the point. It is removing our argument about how life is showing up at any particular moment. So sometimes, as we've all realized, I'm sure by now, that sometimes things are pleasant and go our way and enjoyable and fun, and other times it's more challenging. And that just seems to be how life is. Even as we go further down the spiritual path, so to speak, it doesn't mean that life necessarily presents us with fewer challenges. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But it's all about our perspective when those challenges arise. And so the practice, what we can do is to see how we respond to life when it shows up, especially in more challenging ways. Do we argue with it, or do we take it at face value and respond accordingly? So this doesn't mean rolling over, being a doormat to whatever happens. In fact, just the opposite. It means that when we can avoid arguing with how something shows up, it actually frees our energy to respond more appropriately. We're not playing an old tape in our head about how we've responded to a similar situation before, why it should or shouldn't have happened, why somebody should or shouldn't have done something that they actually did. All we can know for sure is that's what happened, or that is what is happening, and respond accordingly. So it's to respond with freshness for any particular situation really means accepting that that's what's happening in that moment, not arguing with what's happening, but actually responding in the most appropriate way to that. So this is allowing things to be as they are. One of the ways that we can do that is when we're sitting quietly, we can allow the thoughts that arise or the emotions that arise to be as they are without arguing with them, without approving or disapproving, agreeing, disagreeing, liking, disliking. We can just allow that thought or that sensation, that emotion, that old story maybe, to arise and allow it just to be, just to have the light of day without arguing with it. So this is allowing everything to be as it is. In Christian terminology, it's one of the phrases that's used is, "Thy will be done," meaning God will be done. God's will be done. And how that's generally interpreted is that I give God permission to do whatever is happening. But that's not really true. God's will is always happening. You know, life is always happening on its own terms, in its own way. Sometimes it works to our advantage, sometimes to our disadvantage. But it's really a recognition that that's what's already happening. It's like saying, I recognize, I acknowledge, I accept, I honor that life has a will of its own. And I may like it, I may not like it, but I'm on board. I'm on board for the entire ride. Good, bad, indifferent, it's okay. And there's a freedom in having the maturity to allow that full spectrum of life to happen. And by allowing that, it actually frees us not only from the fear of something happening, but also it frees our energy to respond in the most appropriate way to whatever that is happening. So this is really coming into alignment with life, and the practice is to notice when we react to things, when we argue with life, when we say something should or shouldn't have happened, is a clear sign that we're arguing with life. We can feel it in our bodies when our body makes up a story about a situation and we feel a contraction inside, again, a sure sign. So these are ways that we can practice coming into alignment with life in a very practical way in our day-to-day lives with everyday situations, really. And just notice when we are in alignment with life, allowing life to be, and when we're arguing with it, when we're saying something shouldn't have happened, or somebody shouldn't have said something, or should have done something that they didn't do. These are all forms of arguing with life. So we can notice that just in little things. And again, when it's noticed, we don't need to judge it, we don't need to condemn it, we don't need to oppose it. All of that's counterproductive. What we do need to do in those situations is just to be willing to acknowledge it, be willing to allow that tendency to have the light of day, and just that simple observation, that simple noticing, here's the key, without judgment, without condemnation, allowing it to be, freeze it over time. It may take a little time if it's been around for decades, but that's the way those tendencies are released. Oh, there, I reacted in that way again. Okay, I'll be more vigilant the next time. Simple. So that's the process of coming into alignment with life. One of the most important ways to practice approaching our innate divinity.